We'll stand adjourned, and we will now go to the special meeting of the City Council, which we will be calling to order at 2:58 p.m. Thank you, staff. With that, let's have roll call for the City Council.
Councilmember Agajanian.
Present.
Brotman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Mayor Devine. Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian.
Here. May we have your report?
The agenda for the Tuesday, September 14, 2021 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on September 7th on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
All right, thank you. And the item before us, if you can please read it into the record.
Community development regarding consideration of a moratorium on new hotels utilizing downtown specific plan incentive system. A, motion to note and file report. B, motion directing staff to study and review the DSP hotel use incentive in 2022. Introduction of interim urgency ordinance prohibiting issuance of entitlements and or permits for hotel development project in the downtown specific plan. DSP area using hotel use incentives.
Thank you. Mr. Galanian.
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian, members of City Council, this item is being presented to you this afternoon in response to Council Member Brotman's request on the potential for a moratorium on new hotels in the downtown specific plan area. And I'm turning it over to Bradley Calvert, our Assistant Director of Community Development, for the presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the City Council. As mentioned, we're here to discuss the consideration of a moratorium for hotels in the downtown specific plan that are utilizing the hotel use incentive. Part of this conversation was catalyzed during our downtown specific plan update to City Council in 2020. As part of the amendments that were completed with that plan, staff had pledged to come back within a year to kind of provide an overview on the performance of the amendments, if the amendments to the DSP were meeting the council's expectation, the community's expectations. And part of the discussion during that session was the necessity of the hotel use incentive for the DSP. Following a review of a couple of different hotels, as mentioned, council had asked for a report to be brought back regarding whether or not a moratorium would be befitting. So the reason why you see this as a consideration for the downtown specific plan incentive is because of that initial conversation that any potential urgency ordinance that would be adopted for a moratorium would need to tie back to any potential land use changes. Now, as part of that discussion, staff had stated that we would pursue a hotel study. That has not been able to be completed at this time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As we'll mention today, that's not anticipated to begin until sometime next year, when we believe that business travel will start to return to a normal expectation and normal level. We'll also go over some of the hotels today that have been completed using the downtown specific plan incentive and those that are planned, and then the alternatives for council to consider. So the incentive system, the way this works is any hotel that, or any development that proposes to use the downtown specific plan hotel use incentive is allowed to achieve a higher rate of density or height based on the chart here. Typically that would lead to the maximum height in FAR, that lower, those lower columns of information there. And that is really intended to be the hotel serving as a community benefit. And that has really been defined as a benefit based on its importance to supporting a thriving business district and an urban environment, its benefit to other businesses, the spinoff that comes from those hotels, so increased retail activity, increased restaurant activity in our downtown, all parts of those economic development and planning goals of creating an 18-hour city, particularly in the downtown specific plan study area. But these hotels often also provide amenities to the public, whether those be general meeting rooms or other facilities such as cafes, restaurants, coffee shops, but amenities that do encourage that thriving urban environment, some of those uses that are needed in a downtown neighborhood. And those uses also enhance the pedestrian roam. As one of the projects that will highlight the Hotel Indigo, will bring some active uses to the street frontage based on the uses that used to be on that site before. Also important for the hotel uses are the TOT, the transient occupancy tax revenue that is generated for the city. This does represent about 3.2% of the total general fund resources. That is based on a 12% tax on each occupied room. For 2021 fiscal year, we are expected to generate a revenue of $8.1 million from the TOT. Much of that also coming from our hotels downtown. Some of the hotels that have been recently completed using the downtown specific plan hotel use incentive, the Hampton Inn at 315 South Brand, that was completed in 2017. The Hyatt Place at 225 West Wilson was completed in 2019. And the Residence Inn completed at 199 North Louise in 2020. That represents a total of 414 rooms that have been brought online since 2017 using the incentive program.
How come, excuse me,
Yes, Mr. Member Agajanian.
how many rooms this resident inn have?
Individually, you know, off the top of your
No, because,
total is 414. I do not recall off the top of my head how many in the Residence Inn specifically, though.
okay, all right, thank you. That-
It's
yeah,
around 150,
all right,
give or take 10
Thank you,
units.
150, all right, thank you.
Some other hotels that are approved or are proposed that have some level of improvement include the Hotel Indigo at 515 to 523 North Central. That will be 122 rooms. That is currently in plan check. They have received their stage 2 design review approval. The AC Hotel, most recently, which has been in front of council, 120 West Colorado with 130 rooms. That one is fully entitled with a development agreement. And then there's the Hilton expansion at 100 West Glen Oaks. That's anticipated to be 226 rooms, and that has received a stage 1 design approval. So those are all the projects that are pending that have received some level of approval from the city. This is actually a rendering of the Hotel Indigo, the one on Central Avenue, that was last year approved via Design Review Board Stage 2. They are currently in plan check. This was the first project actually that came from the revised and amended downtown specific plan, really with the goal of creating improved design, improved public open space, improved use of materials. So you can see an activated street level there. There's a plaza in the center of the building, fully exposed to the sky. Those were all results of the changes that were made to the downtown specific plan. You can see an active use there anchoring the corner, likely to be a restaurant or cafe of some sort. This was approved by council unanimously at stage 2 design review, really meeting the goals and intents of what that amended downtown specific plan was intended to do. But those hotels have also come with concerns. And as we highlighted during that 2020 session with City Council and the revisit of the downtown specific plan, particularly raising the question, is the hotel use incentive for the DSP still needed? This has been based on potential traffic that's been created, resource impacts, resources that are being used, water, power, police, fire services, and then the ability of those sites to carry a capacity of housing. That has been a comment that we have heard from the public as well. So alternatives for the council to consider today, note and file and decline to introduce an interim ordinance that would place a moratorium on hotel uses in the downtown specific plan using the downtown specific plan hotel use incentive, and wait to engage in the hotel study that's anticipated to be conducted in 2022. Alternative number 2 is to introduce the interim urgency ordinance imposing a moratorium on hotel developments that utilize the hotel use incentive, but exempting those developments that have received at least a stage 1 design review approval. We use that as a starting point to consider pipeline projects, but obviously open for discussion with City Council. And number 3 is the council may consider any other alternative not proposed by staff. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Do any of my colleagues have questions that they'd like to direct to staff?
I have a question, Mr.
Member Najarian.
Mayor Pro. Question is for Bradley. Bradley, does every hotel development that uses the incentives need a development agreement with the city?
They do not always require development agreements, but they do have a covenant for that use for life.
They don't always. So what is the scenario that a hotel would have a development agreement? What would be the cause for that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Najarian, Jillian Van Meiden. So pursuant to Chapter 7 of the DSP, it's either a instrument imposing the covenants or a development agreement. And that development agreement will typically include the covenants that Bradley just described. The difference being that if they want to lock in the zoning for a period of time to create certainty, they would ask for that statutory development agreement, which offers them the opportunity to freeze it. So, for example, if they have a large multi-phase project, there's some delay due to construction concerns or other concerns, they have that certainty in order to obtain the financing, for example, in order to complete that project as originally budgeted. So that would be one of the reasons why they would choose the development agreement, is to lock in those entitlements, the zoning, and the general plan. What wouldn't be locked in would be uniform codes and things of this nature that are applicable across the state.
At what point does action by the city council become a taking of vested rights in projects that are in the pipeline? At various, is there a bright line where council can go too far in limiting a project or not?
Well, you're really asking a vested rights question. And so either there's a contractual vested right pursuant to a development agreement, or a vesting tentative map would be another means by which a project could vest its rights to entitle under certain zoning and general plan regimen. Or there's the traditional method of vesting rights, which is commonly called the AVCO rule, which is in reference to a legal decision. And that is where the developer has a validly issued building permit, is detrimentally relying on that permit by investing a substantial amount of money in reliance on that permit. And it's generally speaking, and that's why I'm saying it's not a bright line rule, it's generally in the neighborhood of around 20% of that permit valuation that they would have had to have invested. So they've excavated, for example. They have installed soldier piles and other forms of reinforcement. They've expended a significant sum of money in reliance. So that would be another way. And of course, that's factually dependent on each of the developments.
How about a design stage 1 approval?
That is not a building permit. Until they have obtained a validly issued building permit and expended that sum of money in reliance on that building permit, they do not vest.
So if I could, I think the answer to your question, legal question, is until one of those things happens where they become vested, there is no taking. They may have spent several $1 million to get to, like the Project Indigo we indicated is in plan check. They may have spent several $1 million to get to that point. But if the rules change, it's kind of the risk of real estate development. You wouldn't have a taking. Now, on the flip side of that, that's just a policy question of the council and how you want to treat development as it comes forward.
And Mr. Najarian and members of the City Council, it's a little more nuanced than that in terms of whether an actual taking has occurred. Would that developer, for example, have been deprived of all economically viable use of the property? There are a number of tests that would need to be, or hurdles that would need to have been overcome in order to establish whether a physical regulatory taking has taken place.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, Member Rotman?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for this report. So as far as if we just get down to the projects that are in the pipeline right now, we have one project, the AC Hotel, which has a development agreement in place, right? So that would be considered having rights vested already, right? That would be a pretty clear-cut case?
Yes.
Okay. The Indigo sounds like they've already gone through stage 1 and stage 2. They're already in plan check. That seems like a gray area.
No, not until they have not until they have a validly issued building permit. They have a vesting tentative map, a development agreement with the city, or they have that validly issued building permit. It's not day one of that permit, is they have relied on it in a substantial way. Usually that's, again, the 20% investment under that permit to create a vested right, and it's factually dependent on that project.
And I would just, Ms. Van Buyden and I have been doing this for years, so she'll give you the legal answer. From a development perspective, a policy perspective, it's up to the council to decide at what point are you going to say, I'm changing the rules because you haven't spent this amount of money, or you have spent this amount of money.
Right.
They're in plan check, they're pretty far along. You are entitled to change it, but the policy question is, do you want to at that point?
Yeah, that's where I was going. So we could draw a line if we wanted and say that any projects that have gone through stage 1 and stage 2 would kind of be able to go forward under the existing rules. I guess we could say a project that's gone through stage 1 could also, but we could draw a line there if we wanted. If we wanted to say, you know, stage 1, nah, not really. Stage 2, yes. We have all that authority to do that. We wouldn't be subject to any kind of legal challenge.
Those are entirely policy decisions, as Mr. Lanzafame indicated.
Okay. The other question I have is on this issue of whether this is a moratorium on the incentive or is a moratorium period during that time until we complete the hotel study and go back and look at what our policy is going to be. I know that I think in the report, I didn't write down exactly how it was described, but it was, you know, the moratorium has to tie to the land use changes that we're considering, right? But I mean, it's up to council what land use changes we want to make. I mean, we could go beyond just removing the incentive. We could do any number of things. I know what we discussed was the incentive, but does that really preclude us from considering a moratorium similar to what we did, I know, a few years ago? I think it was Councilmember Najarian who requested the moratorium on residential development in the downtown. Couldn't we take that same approach and just say, let's hold off, other than the projects that we're going to say are already pretty far along? Couldn't we just hold off until we complete the study, we understand what the supply and demand situation looks like, and then we will decide how we want to approach hotel development in general?
That's one of the options that's presented for the council. Unless Ms. Nukian, who worked diligently on this report, can add additional insights and information for the council.
Thank you, Ms. Van Buyden. Members of City Council, Councilmember Brotman, the way that this item was brought forward and noticed, it was a proposed consideration of a moratorium on the incentive. It was not a consideration of a moratorium on hotel development, period, in the DSP. And the reason was that Community Development's understanding was that the council wanted to study the incentive. If the council wishes to study other land use changes that may either prohibit or conditionally permit or change design standards for hotels in general, that's certainly something you can consider. Statutorily, you can enact a moratorium if you're considering land use changes such as that for all hotels, but we would recommend that this be renoticed and brought back as a different report and different ordinance, because the way it's currently brought is a moratorium for hotel incentive in the DSP.
Okay. I mean, when I requested this item, and anyway, I forget who gave me a second, but I think it was you, yeah. What I had in mind was a moratorium. I wasn't thinking of this nuance. And I know that, you know, staff interpreted it a certain way and brought it forward. And so I'll see what my colleagues think. I would prefer to have a straight moratorium. If there isn't a majority of my colleagues that agree, I'm okay with following staff's, you know, well, it's not really a staff recommendation, but following this concept of just a moratorium on the incentive. So I'm open, but just sharing that my preference would be a moratorium just to give us that breathing room until we can decide what it is we really want to do. Okay, thanks.
Member Agajanian.
I would rather see the incentive, moratorium on incentive. If somebody wants to do something without incentive, they're able to do something, good for them. But in the past, I don't know when was this, 2-3 years ago, I was questioning how many hotels this city needs. This became on every street now we have one hotel. Maybe, I do not know, the occupancy, whenever you ask, they come up with numbers. Eventually, you can't figure out where we stand with our hotels. So many hotels are in Glendale that I'm really surprised if they are losing money or they're making money. I know we get 12% tax revenue, but I don't see that they come and start something and they go bankrupt anyway. The other issue I have is at least AC Hotel, we discussed this before, that one has to go, the old building has to go. I cannot say what's happening in there on this open mic, but I know things are not good in that hotel. So if it will be demolished, new building will come there, I will be happy. The prices probably will be higher and things will change in there. But I will wait until my colleagues to discuss the matter further, and then we see where we are going.
Sure. So I think that, what my understanding was that we were looking at a moratorium on proposed hotels in general, because there was a number of proposals that were coming to us at a time where, you know, the average revenue per room for hotels is at an all-time low, and the industry is not projecting those numbers to return to anywhere near the levels they were pre-COVID until 2025. Prior to that, everyone was, marching down the field with this idea that we're going to build hotels because of the Olympics and because this is a great destination place, et cetera, not necessarily views that I share with those optimists, but and based on speaking to people in the hotel industry who were around during the Olympics in the 80s in Los Angeles, I don't necessarily adhere to that field of dreams philosophy of if we build it, they will come. And I think that we all wanted to see us, put on the brakes, figure out what exactly is happening with the hotels before we approve any other proposals, like the one that was, how many rooms was the one right by the freeway off-brand that was being proposed at 1,300 square foot rooms? 800 rooms, an 800-room hotel, higher than 800. I'm getting the signal from the third base coach telling me it was more than 800 rooms, and it was going to potentially, circumvent. I don't know if it was trying to circumvent paying any impact fees or whatever, but at a time when we seem to have a discussion about the lack of housing in this region and state almost every week, if not every other week. So I appreciate this creative approach that staff may have taken, trying to maybe leave the door open a crack for anything, but I want to see a moratorium on hotels until, and whatever projects have come and have gone there, whatever projects have come before council already and have gone through certain phases of approvals or steps, that's fine. But moving forward, a moratorium on hotels until we can see what's happening in the market, we can see what's happening with the existing hotels before we start wanting to drink the TOT Kool-Aid, the transient occupancy tax Kool-Aid. So that is my position on that. And if that means that staff has to go back and come back to us with a new document, that's what I would put forth. Of course, I wouldn't be able to do that, but it sounds like I have at least one colleague who would. And hopefully someone would second that. Otherwise, I'd pass the gavel. Thank you.
Excuse me, are you saying that these three is, we let them to continue and then moratorium on the, whatever comes forward?
Yes, that would be my understanding.
Is that
Because
your-
I also wouldn't feel right about pulling the rug out from under individuals and companies that investors, developers, property owners who have come to us and we've had discussions and they've walked away with a certain expectation. But we do know that, in the future, there will be others who want to come and build hotels for a variety of reasons, not the least of which what I mentioned is maybe perhaps to circumvent any impact fees. And then who knows what happens down the road. So with that, we do have callers. I do want to turn to the clerk, Mr. City Clerk. How many callers do we have?
Mayor Pro Tem, we do have 2 callers on the line.
Okay, so with 2 callers, let's give each 3 minutes.
Emad Alayubi. Emad, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'm a resident, Glendale area. I'm a retired NFL player, and I'm in the entertainment business. So I highly in touch in my community. With the hotels that I see already, somebody already was speaking about it. The occupancy does not seem high even before COVID. So we're moving more hotels, more people that are going to come into our neighborhood, our community. Not only that, it sounds like a pipe dream because I lived in Atlanta, and a lot of places around 96 before that, they were building hotels outside of Atlanta to get the people for the Olympics. It didn't happen. It was a pipe dream. People aren't coming from LA to go to Glendale to stay when they want to stay closer to the Olympics. So that's a pipe dream that somebody's just fantasizing about. Secondly, it's going to draw more homeless to our neighborhood, our community, because you're going to get more transit people coming here because there's so much more hotels. And we don't want that in our community. We already have that enough in LA County. In Glendale, we don't have a big homeless population. But when you start throwing more availability into that, for them to come, it's going to draw more homeless to our neighborhood. Not only that, it's going to put our police officers on more of a stress because you're getting more people come in. I think before anybody really decides, I think this should be you have to go, yes, stop the moratorium on hotels. Because there should be a lot more research done because just because they say 12% tax to us in the city, that's only if they're selling out all the units. It's going to really make a big difference. So if they're only selling 20 out of 100, it's not a big difference for us. We're just going to cause more traffic, more congestion, things like that, homeless population. That's how I feel as a resident of Glendale. I don't think we need any more. We have enough that isn't being filled, isn't being taken usage of. And I think the people of Glendale will agree with me on that we do not need more. I think you need to pause it. I know money sounds good when it comes 12% back, but that's only if people are filling them up. And I can probably almost guarantee the last 3 years, since before COVID, half these rooms are being used. And I'll yield the floor.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Emad.
Next caller.
Danielle Wilson. Danielle?
Hi there, this is Danielle Wilson with Unite Here Local 11. I have a couple of folks on the line with me who are going to need translation, and I'm going to go ahead and have them speak first, and then I'll translate for them if that's okay.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, if you could add the time so they can translate and we could comply with the law.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and Mr. Clerk. Trini, ¿está en la línea?
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Trini Ramírez. He trabajado en Glendale Hilton durante 22 años como tour down attendant. He vivido en Glendale por 30 años y mi esposo es propietario de una pequeña negocio. Por favor, apruebe una moratoria hotelera para toda la ciudad, para todos los desarrollos hoteleros. En este momento estamos trabajando muy duramente todos los trabajadores para hacer funcionar nuestro hotel. ya que hemos luchado mucho durante el COVID-19. Necesitamos detener el desarrollo hotelero mientras la industria se recupera. Por favor, necesitamos su apoyo.
Muchas gracias, Trini. She said, my name is Trinidad Ramirez. I have worked at the Glendale Hilton for 22 years as a room attendant. I have lived in Glendale for 30 years, and my spouse is a small business owner here in Glendale. Please approve a citywide hotel moratorium. At this time, we are working hard to get our hotel, the Glendale Hilton, up and running as we have been hit hard during COVID-19. We need to stop new hotel development as the industry recovers. Thank you. Okay, Teresa, adelante, por favor. Teresa, ¿está en la línea? Teresa, yo creo que está en mudo en su teléfono.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Teresa Sánchez. He trabajado en el Hilton Glendale por 8 años. He vivido en Glendale durante 30 años. Es muy difícil para nosotros en este momento. Mi familia y yo tenemos muchos problemas. Porque el negocio va muy lento, solo trabajo 2 días a la semana. Por favor, pase una moratoria de hoteles para toda la ciudad, mientras nuestros hoteles existentes no son duros por recuperarse. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Teresa. Lo siento, otra vez, ¿cuántos años trabajaste en el Hilton?
8 años.
8, gracias. Okay, my name is Teresa. I've worked at the Glendale Hilton for 8 years as a housekeeper. I've lived in Glendale for 30 years. It is very difficult at the moment for me and my family because business is so slow. I only work 2 days a week. Please pass a citywide hotel moratorium as our existing hotels fight hard to recover. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, may
Yes.
I speak now?
Sure.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Danielle Wilson with Unite Here Local 11. Look, this is incredible that you guys are bringing this forward, but to Councilman Agajanian's point, if we really want to enact a moratorium, tying it to the hotel incentive program is literally useless. We want to study hotel demand, period. We don't want to study small hotel demand, you know, in the case of developers who don't utilize the incentive program. Let's do a moratorium that actually has meaning. Let's do it now. Let's not cut deals for certain projects and create standards that are different than what the state dictates with development agreements and the definitive expectations developers have under development agreement state law. Let's just do a blanket moratorium citywide to all the council members' points to make this meaningful. Please do this now. Thank you.
So, thank you to the caller.
Councilmember Najarian speak?
Councilmember Najarian, did you have comments? Did you speak yet?
I just have one question.
Sure.
I had some questions on the legal
You did
technicalities, but let me ask planning staff, if I may. How likely is it for a hotel to be planned if it's not going to be able to receive those incentives? Is it still possible to put one through, or are they highly reliant on those incentives that are currently existing?
Mr. Najarian, I would say that most are highly reliant on those incentives. I will also say that we have some indication that there is a hotel developer that could build without the incentives. That's pretty limited situation where there's unique financing, whether they can finance it themselves, and so they really don't have a financing cost, or it's in an area where height isn't necessarily an issue, but they're very limited. But I believe there are some occasions where that might happen. But for the most part, they need the incentive to make that happen, or some city assistance. In 2018, the city council asked us to do the study that we wanted to update. At that time, the indication was if we had the hotels, those 5 that we've referenced, built, that we would have satisfied our need, this is all pre-COVID, but satisfied the need in that business select service category. It also found, though, that we were lacking in high-end 4- and 5-star hotel and extended stay. Our zoning code prohibits kitchenettes in hotel rooms for some of the reasons that were enumerated or by the callers. So extended stay really isn't an option. So that kind of gives you an idea of where. It also said that those hotels, luxury hotels, probably wouldn't happen without the incentive of the city.
So let me get this straight as to where we are now. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and Mr. Brotman, you're proposing having staff come back with a properly agendized total moratorium without necessarily dealing with only the incentive issue. Is that correct? Is that what the motion was?
If I could. Yeah, that is what I was thinking. How long would it take for staff to come back with that?
Before we go into that, Councilmember Brotman and members of the City Council, I just want to point out that you cannot just do a moratorium on a use unless you are simultaneously studying the use. For example, for hotels, eliminating the use entirely. We would need to know, or revising the standards, or making it a conditional use, anything like that, revising the zoning standards, the general plan, specific plan, something like that. You would need to be studying an aspect of that. The whole purpose legally behind why the government code gives cities the ability to do a moratorium is to prevent a rush to the planning counter while something is being studied. So it cannot just happen in a vacuum. It has to be in conjunction with something that the council has wanted to study.
So if we're studying the rate of the hotel industry and hospitality industry recovering post-COVID, is that not?
I don't believe legally that would be a zoning standard, no. It would have to be something like a design standard, a use standard, something like that where it's tied to the land use. For example, when we did the DSP moratorium, the reason we were comfortable doing that is because the council was studying design standards in the downtown specific plan and how to, it was a drastic overhaul of that. But here, just studying the economics behind it and the demand for it, we don't think it meets the standard of Government Code 65858, which talks about, while the council is studying, considering or studying or intends to study within a reasonable time, prohibiting uses that may be in conflict with a contemplated general plan, specific plan, or zoning proposal that they are studying. So it has to be tied to some sort of standard in the zoning code, some sort of land use allowance.
But
Member Agajanian, please.
Yeah.
And then I'll.
Eliminating the incentive is no problem, that we are not going to give any incentive based on.
Meaning you could do a moratorium for that, yes.
Yeah, we don't want to offer any incentive for our moratorium, that's okay, right?
Because you're specifically going to be studying the incentive.
Right.
And we have a companion motion with this report, should you choose to introduce the ordinance as written. It would be to study, motion to study the downtown specific plan hotel use incentive.
If I can just clarify a little bit, the incentive was put in place to encourage hotel development because we were lacking in rooms. We were losing tourists and business activity to our neighboring cities that had hotels. So the incentive was there to attract. If you wanted to look at the market and say, you know what, I don't need the incentive anymore. That's really the purpose behind this concept here. I would say another would be if you wanted to eliminate the use altogether in the downtown. I would not recommend that, but that could be. Or if you wanted to condition it, perhaps those are things. But to just say, let's stop until we look at that and then go forward, we might, as Ms. Nukian has said, we might run into some issues.
Why would you not recommend eliminating that use completely at this moment?
I think there may be a time where you want to see hotel development begin again. So I wouldn't recommend taking it out altogether. But you could condition it. You could say, you know what, I'm going to take the incentive out because I don't need to encourage you anymore. If you can do it, and I would say that if somebody does it on their own, that is with no incentive or no assistance from the city, there's also going to be that check and balance with the bank. Whoever is financing it, they're going to make sure that there's some pretty solid data behind the need for those additional units.
In recent years, excuse me, in recent years, do we have any hotel that did not ask for incentive when they did the building? So far?
I believe recently the hotel, it's a Holiday Inn Express on Colorado. They did not ask for that incentive. That's a new hotel. It was not included in our study because it was outside the downtown, but it did not benefit from those incentives. It's a garden style hotel, so it doesn't need incentives and height and whatnot. But that was maybe, trying to think, the Hampton Inn had the incentive as well. Hilton, the Hyatt.
But others, they asked for the incentive.
The others took advantage of the incentive. The ones that we talked about in the report here is Hyatt, Hamilton, Hampton Inn, Embassy Suites was a redevelopment deal, so it had some incentive built in for that. The Indigo. The Hotel Louise that was recently completed, those all took advantage of the incentive.
Member Brotman?
Yeah,
we cut you off. I apologize.
No, it's okay. Could we not include in what we're studying the possibility of making hotel use in the downtown discretionary? Could we do that where we're not saying it's not an allowed use. We're not saying it's by right. We're saying it's discretionary, and I'm not sure. Can we go there?
Well, I don't know if you can say, I'm going to sit up here and decide whether you can have a hotel or not, but you could make it a conditional use, and
Well,
then
that's what
you
I'm
could
thinking,
set conditions on that.
Like it would require a conditional use permit. We could do, and if we were studying that, then we could potentially have just a straight moratorium. Is that right?
Yes, so that is tied to a zoning code modification. If you're studying that, then there is a justification to put a pause on all hotel development, and then, it's to avoid people rushing to the counter before this new development standard goes into effect or new zoning code standard goes into effect and try to get their hotels approved immediately. You would just place a pause on all hotel development while you're studying that specific or set of zoning code changes or general plan changes or whatever the case may be.
Well, that would be my recommendation, is that we would do that. That would allow us to study all the issues and look at possible changes that could include just removing the incentive, or they could include requiring a conditional use permit. And then we would put a moratorium. I would draw the line as far as the existing pipeline goes, or anything that comes forward. I would draw the line between stage 1 and stage 2. But I'll leave that, to my colleagues to see whether there's strong opinions one way or the other.
Member Agajanian.
I have one more question. Do we have, staff has any study that during 2028 Olympic Games, how many guests they will come to Glendale? Do we have any idea what will happen in 2028? Because the hotels will be important part of this.
I can't give you a number, and I'm not sure anybody can, because when people start planning this, everybody started planning a hotel for the Olympics before COVID. And now nobody really knows, especially the banks, what impact COVID is going to have. How do the Olympics change? We saw what it looked like in Tokyo during a pandemic. How do the Olympics change? Nobody's really sure. So I don't know that that study has been done. The units that we considered in the 2018 study, those were exclusive of the Olympics. They would certainly take advantage. Any rooms that are built now would benefit from the Olympics, but they were not being built specifically for the Olympics in 2028.
All right, Mike, I just want to put a pause on this for 1 minute. We do have one caller, and this will be the last caller we take on this item because we've had adequate time for anyone who wished to speak on this item to call up until this point. So this will be the last call we take on this item.
Isabel Valencia, you have 3 minutes. Isabel, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? My name is Isabel, and I have I work in a hotel in Glendale Hilton for 20 years, and I have lived in Glendale for over 30 years. I want to thank the city for coming forward with this hotel moratorium. However, please make sure it applies to all hotels citywide to make it as effective as possible. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. So where are we right now with this? There was a suggestion for a motion by
I can make a
Councilmember Brotman.
motion. Should I make a motion?
Yes,
Before
well, one
you-
moment. We have our legal counsel.
I
wanting
apologize
to
for the
make comment.
interrupt.
Go
I
ahead.
apologize for the interruption, council members. I just want to clarify if your desire is to bring back an item for a hotel moratorium citywide or just in the DSP, just for staff's benefit.
Citywide, what's the difference?
I hadn't thought about that. I was thinking DSP, but
Hey, we can start with the DSP if that's tied to what the study has to be. I think that's more. I think it would give probably our legal staff a little bit of ease to come up with that. I think the DSP isn't part of the city where we have more control. Am I correct in that based on council decisions?
Actually, it really would be up to community development, probably to inform council as to if hotel uses have conditional uses outside of the DSP or not. I'm not familiar with that off the top of my head. But either way, it's really up to the council if they want.
If it's the addition of just an extra sentence to give us the option of both when it is brought back, I think that'll give us enough time and my colleagues to mull it over and figure out what the desire is. Certainly, I think you've gotten a sense of what we are looking for versus doing away with simply just incentives. If we can just bring back two options and then we can figure it out then.
I think you're correct in that in the DSP is where you do have the most control. You also have the zoning that's more conducive to hotel use. I mentioned the hotel on Colorado. There was also the Victory Hotel. They actually was too small, and that project is languishing. I don't know citywide of any other proposals. We were really focused on the downtown specific plan. I don't know in 2 weeks that we could probably get a pretty good idea, but I wouldn't have as much detail as what's being proposed in the downtown specific plan.
I would just stick to the downtown specific plan.
Sure,
If it's going to delay us to
sure,
broaden it.
and I don't. My preference would be just to put a pause on everything altogether. But I think that if we start with the downtown specific plan, it's as good a place to start as any, given council's direct involvement in that part of the city and the plans related to it. Let me ask my colleagues. I know Councilmember Agajanian has a comment. Councilmember Najarian, do you wish to speak after Councilmember Agajanian?
Just briefly, for one sentence, I would support Mr. Brotman's concept of the downtown specific plan.
So that motion does have a second.
Okay.
Councilmember Agajanian.
Excluding these 3 projects which is in the pipe?
No.
It would
These 3?
exclude the projects that were mentioned in the report, correct?
No, because what I suggested was that we draw the line between stage 1 and stage 2, so that if a project has gone fully through stage 2 and it's in plan check, I would think that's very far along and that should move forward. And I would say the same, obviously, for the one hotel that already has a development agreement. I think those 2 are so far along. I would personally say if it's only been stage 1, I think that should probably fall under the moratorium. Am I making sense?
May I, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and council members, good afternoon. Since you're going to have to make that decision when we bring back this re-agendized item in a few weeks, my suggestion is just to provide the direction for us to bring it back. We'll bring you those options that would include that, and then you can make the decision, have the discussion, make the decision then. But we'll have it so that it grandfathers in, though, to have only stage 2, and then we'll give you an option that includes where it grandfathers the ones that have stage 1 or stage 2.
All right.
And then you can make the decision then.
So that is Councilmember Brotman's motion, and Councilmember Najarian, is that a motion that you're seconding?
Yes, I would support Brotman.
Thank you. With that, let's have a roll call.
Councilmember Agajanian?
Yes.
Brotman?
Yes.
Najarian?
Yes.
Mayor Devine? And Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian.
Yes. All right, with that, let us adjourn this special meeting of the City Council. Do we have a motion to adjourn and a second?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone who called in. Let's move on to the City Council agenda. I'd like to open the City Council meeting at 3:49. May we please have roll call?
Councilmember Agajanian?
Present.
Brotman?
Here.
Najarian?
Here.
Mayor Devine? And Mayor Pro Tem Kasakian.
Here. What are the items before us?
One would be closed session, 1A conference with real property negotiators, property location 216 North Brand Boulevard and 116 West California Avenue. Negotiating parties, Glendale Arts, SAS Entertainment, and General Admission. Agency negotiators attending the closed session are Rubik Olanian, Michael J. Garcia, Jillian Van Meiden, Philip Lanzafame, Michelle Flynn, and Bradley Calvert. Instructions to the negotiators will concern the price and terms for the lease of property. B would be conference with labor negotiators. The city designated negotiators attending closed session are Rubik Olanian, Michael J. Garcia, Jillian Van Meiden, Matt Doyle, John Tuktayan, Amy Martin, Sylvia Lanzas, and Michelle Flynn. The names of the employee organizations are Glendale Management Association, Glendale City Employee Association, Glendale Police Association, Glendale Fire Association, and IBEW Local 18, Unit 40. C would be conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure litigation pursuant to the paragraph subdivision D2 and E1 of the section 54956.9, one potential case. D, conference with legal counsel, pending litigation, City of Glendale versus Camp Rose, LASC case number 19ST CV37455.
Those are it?
That's it.
Thank you. Do we anticipate reporting out on any of these items?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, no, we do not.
All right. With that, we'll recess to closed session.